Are you concerned about all this corruption being misgendered as conspiracies? Well, don't you worry. Sit back, relax, and join in the conversation as we talk with today's guest. Welcome to another LSB Film Productions podcast with your host, Chris Brooks.
Hello and welcome to the channel. It's me, Chris Brooks, for another LSB Film podcast, and today I'm joined with the wonderful bowler hat farmer, that is Mark Byford.
Chris, how are we doing, young man?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm all right, Chris. I'm as I was just saying off air. I'm better after cutting the sugar out for a couple of weeks, and I wouldn't have believed it could be so addictive, to be honest, because it was like, not that I've ever done it, but I can imagine, if someone was coming off of something like Coke or something, that there was that the downs, and that was pretty horrendous for a couple of 3 days.
I think
then
they called it the withdrawals.
They definitely did that one.
Yeah. So you were in bed because of the sugar detox.
Yeah. It completely put me on my arse. And bear in mind that, even COVID didn't get me on my arse. But it just shocks me. And I think what I found Andrew over at Wyndham, who's a friend of mine, is a health coach. And I said to him, it's fucking really bad. And he said, have you substituted the sugar with anything else for your body to eat? He said, because the problem is at the minute you'll start losing body mass real quick. He said, with your work, he said, you probably use about 8,000 calories a day. And if you're only now getting 2,000 calories in, he said, it's going to rip your body to bits. So he suggested I go on a high-fat diet. So we upped the pork chops and the bacon, and we were well away.
Nice.
All British bacon and British pork chops. It gets no better, Chris.
No, absolutely not. And I have you on the show, and given obviously you're a farmer, as we head into the autumn now, and we've had a summer, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a summer to write home about, but how are we crop-wise? What's it looking like?
Okay, Chris, I always use the example of this funnel, what we have. And we had, in the 70s and 80s, we had this funnel which was heaped up with food. It was abundant. And over the course of the last 30, 40 years, we've shrunk that down. So we've only had the hopper been level. Now it's gone down. It's down the bottom of the pipe. What the harvester's done is topped that pipe up, but there ain't much in the hopper. We are in a very bad situation, I believe. This year will be the challenge we have this year, Chris, is that this is the last full harvest we will or can have for a minimum of 5 years. Now, the reason I say that is because a lot of the land this year goes into either these various arrangement of set-aside schemes where, farmers are paid £300 an acre to grow pretty flowers for the bees. Great for the birds, great for the bees. There's less birds than there was. There's definitely less bees than there was. So who's benefiting from it? The problem is, Chris, that the minute you're into the set-aside schemes, you're in there for 5 years. So even if there's a food shortage, unless the government changes policy, farmers are trapped in it. Now, the problem is these days, because of how everything's governed, we can't even buy seed for that field should we need to, because the government says that's under set aside. So there's lots and lots which they've curtailed.
What does that word mean? What does that word mean? Set aside under what?
So effectively, what they've done, Chris, is there's various names for this, but what they've done is if you set your field aside, effectively what you're doing is you're taking it out of circulation to the point of producing food, hay, straw, whatever that might be. And you then either do nothing with it, so it just sits fallow, or you grow pretty flowers on it. And the schemes are 5 years apiece.
So this is the whole rewilding thing?
Yes, rewilding, another name for it, Chris. So what happens is that all the farmers get carried away in that, this is fantastic. We can get 300 quid an acre. We haven't even got to think and cut the grass. This is great. Then we come down to the reality of it. At the end of 5 years, bear in mind now they can't use any weed killers, no fertilizers, nothing anymore. That's all getting curtailed down. We have got the situation that those farmers now, when they come to grow food on that site, if potentially in 5 years' time, the weed problem is going to be horrendous. They won't be able to grow any food. we're seeing it already on some of the fields which have been on set aside and rewilding, which are now coming out of certain schemes. As a drive around the country, you see it where they've got beautiful fields of wheat, absolutely devastated by weeds, of whether it's thistles or black grass or something else. Now the problem is, Chris, when you then cut that field next harvest, all of that seed from the weeds is in there as well. Now, if you're lucky, this year it didn't work. I've got to say, this year it didn't work. I had a field of barley, a 15-acre field of barley, which it was mine. The guys went to cut it for me, and the thistles were so bad. Whilst the combine cut the thistles, what would normally happen is it would go through the machine, through the combine harvester, and
contaminate your stock.
It contaminates, so that's all got to be cleaned before you can sell it. So it has to go through a special cleaning process, which is about sort of £12 a tonne, which takes all the profit out of it. The other side of the problem is this year that the weeds, because they'd had so much water, hadn't died off at the same rate that the grain had. So what you ended up with was green thistle in it, which blocks the combine up. So it was every so often having to stop and sort it out. This is only going to progressively get worse. And all of this, Chris, pushes the price of food up. And we know why they're doing it.
Does that having so much weed in the soil, does that have any kind of effect on the moisture levels, either where the crops aren't getting enough because it's all being absorbed by the weeds, or whether the weeds are, I don't know.
There's arguments both sides. And the reason I say is because the wheat we grow these days, wheat, barley, oats, whatever it might be, it's really shallow. You've got about 6 to 9 inches of root. So it's all reliant on the top soil being productive. You tend to find with things like thistles or stinging nettles, the roots go down, foot after foot after foot. So it doesn't really affect the crop. Okay. Where you do have the problem is if you get things like grass growing in it, what is shallow rooted grass, or things like bellbine and sort of ground covery weed, it tends to suck the moisture from the top. But what it can also do, and there is the companion growing side of this, Chris, that it's sometimes beneficial, because if you can get a weed that covers the ground, it stops the moisture coming out of the ground. So it isn't always necessarily bad. The problem is that you don't get to choose what weeds you have. No, that's it. So
swings and roundabouts, eh?
Yeah. So we what we have seen is that as we roll into the harvest coming to an end, we were really lucky, and I mean really lucky. When we needed sunshine, we had a couple of days of sunshine. When it was wet, we just got on with other things. We were lucky. We got all the harvest in, all the hay in, all the straw in, everything tucked away quite nicely before we were in the position that we had the rain again. So we were blessed. What I will say is, the amount of grain per tonne is down this year considerably, because, first year we've not been allowed to use phosphates so much, so, and the cost of phosphates have gone through the roof, Chris. So, people are using less of it. It's given us less production. Again, less production forces the price up. And we're seeing this all over the shop with every crop what's coming out of the ground. The only thing what's done really well this year is sugar beet. What are we saying? We need more sugar.
The one bloody source of food which we could do with less.
Absolutely.
Couldn't make it up, could you?
No, you couldn't. I mean, we've seen it on things like potatoes have done well this year. All the root veg, basically, because it was nice and wet. Some were late going in. We were late getting potatoes in this year, but they've done really well, I have to say. We didn't have much time this year where we really needed to irrigate. Some of the farmers who are hell bent on getting huge tonnage out for contracts, for like McDonald's or McCain for chips and things, they're pushed all the time to get the tonnage up. Someone like us, we're growing them for ourselves and just to sell in this shop, it's not such a big issue. But for the bigger producers, they have to water all the time. And this is why you go out and you see it'll be pouring with rain and they're irrigating the fields, and people go, why? Because they've got to get those potatoes to swell up to hit the weights they need for the contracts. Again, these contracts are all...
So whenever you see a field flooding in torrential rain and a sprayer on, you can guarantee that there'll be potatoes in that field.
absolutely. And you can also guarantee that they'll be for someone's contract. They won't be for the farmer to sell at the farm gate, otherwise he wouldn't waste the water.
It does seem weird, yeah.
So,
You
yeah.
wouldn't think you'd need that in this country. Really.
It's bizarre, mate.
Isn't it? Do you find, or have you found, no, this is just going off on a tangent, but with the old plane signatures in the sky,
Yes.
do you find that has affected the crops?
Absolutely. What I will say is, Chris, that the amount of stillbirths this year in sheep and cows has gone through the roof. It's up about 100% on what it would normally be, so it's doubled this year. I put that down to the amount of heavy metals that are in the ground, on the grass. You know, all this shit what they put up there has to come down somewhere. We've noticed it this year. It definitely held the crops back that we were growing on the veg beds. And you also noticed this year, Chris, that there was almost like a metallic-y sheen to a lot of the leaves this year. I noticed it was very much on the French beans and the broad beans this year. The stuff what went in that got ahead early, the tomatoes, they had a lot of black speckles on the leaves, and a lot of that could be down to water damage, but I don't think it was. I think it was down to chemical reaction, to be honest. I also noticed this year on the horse chestnut trees, you know, what we deem as conker trees. If you look at them round where we are, I don't know, you know, certainly different parts of the country I've visited, I've noticed it, you know, in several places. The underneath of the trees are beautiful and green, but on top, the whole canopy of the trees is burnt off like it's had some chemical rain on it. And I've noticed that right across the country this year. So whether they're more susceptible to that burn because of the chemicals in the atmosphere or not, I don't know. But yeah, 100% definitely noticed it this year. For the farming community as a whole has noticed it this year. Even people that weren't awake and weren't noticing have noticed this year that there is underlying issues, even if they can't put two and two together to work out what it is.
Really, blimey. So do farmers, I suppose you must do to a certain extent, where you test the soil for contaminants and
yeah,
things.
It's interesting because we're just going down the road of putting electroculture on the veg beds on the farm, which we started this year. And so at the start of last year, when Ray kindly said that I could, you know, sort of have this part of the field for doing the veg beds, obviously, Chris, this land has been raped of every piece of goodness it could ever produce. So I had it soil tested and it came back with 5% goodness in the soil. Now, and the reason I say
Only
that it's
5?
raped is because a friend of mine who's a big farmer in potatoes and onions, he said to me, he said, "Oh, we don't even farm anymore." He said, "We mine for potatoes and onions." He said, "That's what we do." He said, "We just put them in the ground, chuck loads of chemicals on. We don't need to worry about the content of the ground." But now they're starting to realise that now they can't use the fertilisers, the ground doesn't actually grow fecal. So last year I had the soil tested, 5% goodness in it. But since then, Chris, I've also learned, I know a lot about composting and manuring and the essential requirement to do that to the soil. I didn't understand some very basics, and I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but I'm passionate about ploughing. I love to go down a field ploughing. You see beautiful straight lines. And the problem is, Chris, that most people don't know this. So in the top 12 inches of the soil, you have every piece of goodness and every bio that the plants could possibly want. The worms, you know, the bacteria, what's there. So what do? You go along and you plough it and you turn it all upside down. So what happens is the stuff that should be at the top's at the bottom and the bottom's at the top, and it then takes 12 months for that to kind of work its way around again to start doing some goodness. And what do? We can plough it again and turn it up again. So it's constantly being turned, so it can never rebuild itself. So what I did was when I had the soil tested, the guys what came out and did it were absolutely so knowledgeable. He said to me, so we put lots of coir compost onto it, which we were kindly given by a big grower down towards Stansted Airport. Covered the ground thick with that. Lightly tilled that in with a rotator which goes round that way rather than a rotavator going that way. And we ended up with this really nice bed. Then we put the beans on. If I talk about the bean area, for instance, the bean garden, put the beans on top of the soil and then covered it in more coir compost. So, and they did really, really, really well. Good, healthy plants. They were really good beans. You know, I've got my own seed, so I'm fortunate on the fact that my grandfather, you know, when I was 5, gave me beans and said, plant these, eat some, keep some, eat some, keep some. And every year I've grown my beans for the last 51 years, and you know, I've still got my own seed. So it's been really good to sort of see how the soil's doing. And I turned the site section over the other day. I was actually planting a buddleia tree in the bee garden on the veg bed. We've got a section for bees now. And one of the things I did is I dug a hole to put some manure in. I noticed to start to see the worms what are back in the ground now, which weren't there a year ago, even just in such a short time. So, you know, farmers can turn this round, Chris. And what I will say is a lot of the small growers are used to seeing 20 to 40 tonne an acre of produce, right? So farmers would normally produce to get 4 or 5 tonne an acre, if that was like potatoes or wheat, whatever it might be. Now, with the electroculture, I'm told I can double my crop yield. Well, if I can get 40 tonne already and I can get that up to 80 tonne, you can see how we could potentially, and I don't want to blab about this because it always worries me when I make this statement, but we could potentially have a lot less space to grow the same amount of food in. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing desecration of farmland under SSI schemes, these sites of scientific interest. So if, you know, DEFRA comes along and says, or the Environment Agency, you've got newts there, you can't grow, you know, you can't grow anything within, you know, these 16 fields, you're knackered. You can't grow anything. It's as simple as that. The only thing you can do is take the hand out. These are popping up all over the bloody country, Chris. Yorkshire Moors, they're now stopping a lot of the farmers who are tenant farmers grazing on the rights of, on the royal land.
Is there gonna come a point where people, farmers, obviously farmers, say, no, fuck you, this is my land? You know, we've got all these regulations and systems in place that keep you, that basically prohibit you from advancing and being fruitful in what you're producing. So for me, the only real solution at any point is when the man turns around to the BIS system and say, fuck off.
Yeah, non-compliance is the only answer. So a little while ago, they brought out this thing where you've got to register all your chickens at home. So for the chickens, if your chicken identifies as a duck, a swan, a goose, whatever it might be, it doesn't need to be registered. And in a world where we're told boys can identify as girls and girls can identify as boys, why can't a chicken identify as a fox? So do you need to register your birds? Well, you're supposed to. Now, what I will say is it states on the DEFRA website you must register flocks of over 50 birds. Okay?
And that is quite a big amount, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Now, obviously, we've put turkeys on the farm this year, 49 to be precise. So we didn't need to register them. Now, you can understand, Chris, how farmers are going to get frustrated with all this bureaucracy because I've never in my life witnessed anything, you know, like it. But what I do love about it, Chris, is history has the time to repeat itself, you know. And if you dig back through history and look at the Roman Empire, the reason it collapsed was because of bureaucracy. Now, I can see that we are, as I'm sure you and most of your viewers will be aware, Chris, we are in the midst of a catastrophic collapse.
We are a little bit. In fact, there's two things which, and obviously you've just named one of them, so perhaps there's three things. Before the collapse of every civilization, they've always gone mad on pathetic rules and just ridiculous legislation for no reason. Just that too.
Yep.
Transgenders as well. That was a big thing before the fall of the Roman Empire and other civilizations. And so you're right, we are seeing what it would very much appear a little bit of history repeating.
Chris, you have to, I mean, you know, am I a conspiracy theorist? I like to think more of a truthist personally, but if you go back through the history books...
Well, the thing is, conspiracies exist. Well, you know, people say, "Oh, that's not a conspiracy." Well, actually, no, it is. There's a difference between a conspiracy and a conspiracy theory. So, you know, conspiracies do exist. That's you know, there's no argument there. So, whenever people say about conspiracy, they just use that term so broadly when really,
absolutely,
conspiracies do exist. You know, it's been proven time and time and time again. We're just talking about a theory because it hasn't yet been proven to be true. And
Absolutely.
there's a huge difference, and usually about 3 to 6 months, isn't it, between
Absolutely.
theory to
What I
fact?
was going to say, Chris, I do wonder if we know that history has played this out before, and not once, you can go back and check on any main civilization. It's the same things as collapsed them every time. You have to ask who's got the playbook and who's playing the book out, because they know. You know, I would say the challenges what happened in the UK just a few weeks ago were only the tip of the iceberg, and I hate to say that because I think we've got a lot more coming. But what I think that's where we get to on that curve. We go through that point. They push, and then we kick back. And the kickback, you know, even if that kickback takes 1 to 10 years, that kickback is what flips it over the edge, crashes the system, and we start again. You know, and what's the next system going to look like? Well, we won't talk about digital currencies and, you know, jibby jab passports and, you know, all the other things which they want to pleasure us with.
No. Well, see, that's the thing with power, isn't it? It's like, what do you do? Where do you go from what we're used to? Because you've seen it yourself. I'm sure you've witnessed and experienced it yourself within like the truth movement. You know, it's if you become slightly successful or your crowd gets a certain size and automatically, oh, here's a shill. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, so essentially there's no trust. There is no real trust, even within the truth movement. We're all warriors, we're all brothers. When push comes to shove,
They're not.
There's no trust. There's no trust there.
No.
So what is the solution then? How do we put things in place when the average person's mentality is you've got to trust yourself, you've got to fend for yourself? It's like,
it's interesting. I'll tell you one thing I do know, Chris, is in the last round of political nonsense, I was helping one of the parties, a fairly new party, let's say. I won't name who, but you know, I was working very well with, you know, this kind of colour party who wanted to do some reforms in the UK. And you know, what I noticed was that there were some really, really good people who had no idea about politics that were just in the position they wanted to make things right. And I think that's what we need more of, you know, because unfortunately we've ended up with a lot of career politicians that, and Chris, we all know these people will do whatever is necessary to stay in power because the gravy boat is so absolutely bloody wonderful for them, they daren't get chucked overboard. So and even if they do get chucked overboard, what happens? They turn up as a director on some big company, you know, on you know, £200,000 a year, getting more than they were as a politician. We've seen it time and time and time again. So for me, what I wanted, you know, the reason I got involved was because I'm just a fucking nobody. And all I wanted to do was to try and make a sort of difference to the country we live in. And I think a lot of people that got involved this time round in politics were all in that position. They saw it as a kickback against the establishment. You know,
I mean, No Farms, No Food was a very successful campaign. You know, I was seeing that on all kinds of places. Now, if I had to come up with a campaign and I was seeing it on these, I'd be well chuffed. Yeah. So that was very good. So there's obviously the appetite for this,
absolutely,
and the change.
And that's why I come to. You know, I think where things have very much changed. We all know in 2020 that what happened. We all know it woke a lot of people up, but it hasn't woke as many people up as the last 4 years has. And I think people like yourself, you know, myself, you know, people like Richard Vobes and Katie Hopkins, loads of different people that have been brave enough to stand up and call out the bullshit, have actually been in a position of helping to wake people up en masse. Chris, I've got people now, you know, probably like yourself, when I was commenting about, you know, in 2020 about jibby jabs and the BS around it, I had my friends slaughter me on social media. The same friends now, and I'll tell you what, I went to the bank one day, and I won't name the bank manager or the bank, but I went to the bank one day, and a friend of mine was a bank manager, and he said to me, he said, God, he said, you put some shit on Facebook. He said, I cannot believe, he said, that you actually believe that crap. And I said, well, it's each their own. I said, but it'll all come out in time. The very same person the other day had posted about, these pretty signatures in the sky you were talking about earlier. He posted about them saying, I can't believe these people are getting away with this. And I messaged him and I said, I did tell you about this 4 years ago. And so people that, establishment people, Chris, they're even seeing it. They're waking up to it. People who didn't come out of the office very often, they now know when they go home and they go, that ain't right. It weren't like that when I was a kid. So I think the thing is that lots of things have woken people up, haven't they? Whether it was the lockdowns, whether it was the jibby jabs, whether it was the accidents that happened to people along the way who spoke out about it, whether it was people being silenced, whether it was, whatever it was, all of this, as people have gone, I don't know what it is. I can see there's an issue here and an issue here, but I can't put the dots together. Where some of us have gone, I can see that they all join up. But some people haven't yet got to that point. But what they have done, they know there's issues. They don't know what the issues are. So, a classic, someone said to me the other day, and I smiled my head off. This is my younger sister, bless her. She said to me, she was talking about our beloved and, amazing, hats off to, to our PM. And she was talking about him and she said, I just can't understand how he makes such bad decisions. I said, he isn't making bad decisions. Well, one, he's not making them, but two, he's making the right decisions for what they're trying to achieve. And that when you understand that, you can look at it and just smile and go, well, I know why he's done that. I know why he's done that.
Well, it's the whole thing that David Icke always used to say, it's problem, reaction, solution. And when you know what the outcome is, you can spot the clues along the journey. It's easy because you know what the final product is. So you can see it being built. Oh yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that more people are waking up to that because, education is a huge thing, which is why our school education sucks. And so education is a huge thing, and it is, it's as much about waking people up about to what's going on, but actually getting, making these people understand why it's going on. Because to a lot of normies, it just looks like a lot of incompetent idiots.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
getting away with everything. Well, no, actually, they're not. They're strategically put there, and there's a plan which is just rolling out, and they're just little players in it. So yeah.
He said, I know this is slightly off the spec of the farming side, but I'll just cover something that Lee Anderson was in Parliament the other day and said. One of the Reform MPs, he said. He was talking about, I think it was his uncle had gone off to fight in a war in Africa, he said, and he said he left his wife and children at home to go and fight a war in another country. Just hold that thought, Chris. What do you think about that? Because if you take lots of people who are visiting the UK at present, let's say, on little boats, is that what they're doing? Are they gathering? Are they
going to London to see the Queen, or are they going to?
Are they going to a war what hasn't yet happened?
Well, I have heard the rumours that they're UN foot soldiers.
Absolutely, yeah, I have too. But
then I've also heard rumours that they're the guys who are going to take out all the corruption.
Yeah.
In a 3-day span, when they're there to wipe all that out. All I know is, I would be less inclined to believe the latter, simply because of all the things that you see in the newspaper and in the news. Like, actually, no, sorry, you don't see it in the news because they won't show this kind of stuff. But you see it on lots of videos on social media, like that lady, that poor young girl who was stood looking at her phone. I think it was at a train station. And one of these reprobates just walked past and goes whack, and she goes,
face, I saw that.
They're no heroes. They're not here to save us.
No.
So I don't even know if the UN foot soldiers would be that callous and.
I think unfortunate, Chris. And
I think they're just undesirable people who have come over here, turning the third world people, turning our country into a third world country
I'd
by
agree.
design.
Unfortunately, I think, unfortunately, Chris, that in any society you have good and bad people.
Hmm.
You know, and you've met my partner. You know, she's black Nigerian. So when people call me out, and after this interview and say, "Oh, it's because you're racist," no, it ain't. Trust me. We were having the conversation this morning, and she said to me after I said about I showed her the Lee Anderson video. I said, "What do you think about that?" She said, "What's really sad," she said, "is all the Muslims that have come to the UK that have settled, integrated, running businesses, genuine people who wanted to be here for a better life. They're the ones in all of this what are going to get harmed more than anybody."
Yeah,
And I think that's really, really sad. Really
absolutely.
sad
Yeah,
times.
no, 100%. No, because yeah, those people were are the backbone of Britain, really,
Absolutely.
especially that that era.
Absolutely. Chris, in the world we live in, no British person wanted to do all the shit jobs, which is why there's so many had the opportunity to come here.
Hmm.
Working in the meat industry, the veg packing industry, you couldn't get anyone English to work in those. No one wanted. I kid you not. A friend of mine is a gangmaster for one of the big farms up in Lincolnshire. They haven't got one English person work on a farm because no one wants to work. No one wants a
Really?
job. It's like,
See, I
what?
see. I find that really amazing or difficult because given I don't know, working in a factory or working on a farm, I would much prefer to do something like that than be stuck in a. I know it's hard graft, but it's a better life.
But would you rather sit at home on benefits and play on your game all day, Chris? And that's what we've
Well,
got to, isn't it? And that's the problem.
yeah, yeah, there is certainly an element of that. See, the issue we've got in 21st century Britain in 2004 is that you've got people going to work full time and they're still on benefits because the system's so shit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's
And
that's
yeah, and like you say, and you've got, when you look at, I spoke to my ex-partner the other day, and she's in social housing, and she was saying about the fact that, she's having lots of trouble with the neighbours and so forth. And I said to her, why don't you move? How much is your rent? Thinking because she's in social housing, it'd be cheap. I was thinking it was going to kind of be £400 or £500 a month for a 2-bedroom place. And she said, no, it's about £850 a month.
mm.
I was like, what? And that's supposed to be cheap, affordable housing that they're building for people to live in. It's like, hell, that's
Well,
horrible.
I suppose the average. I mean, I don't know because I haven't looked into it for a long time, but I would imagine the average rate for rent is around 1,200 quid
Yeah,
a
it is. Yeah,
month. Yeah.
yeah. The one she's in, there's one identical over on the estate, just over from her. What someone had bought to rent out, which was one made exactly, say, £1,127 a month.
Mm.
She
It's
showed me. I was like,
ridiculous.
I can believe it. I was like, that can't be right. That cannot be right. Where did we get to? My dad was telling me the other day, and bless him, he's 84 now, and he's not very well. But he was saying that when he started work for the council when he was in his early 20s, they were fortunate enough to be because him and mum had got married, and because he worked for the council, it was really easy then to get a house, and their rent was 10% of his wages. Now, one person needs to go to work just to pay the freaking rent. And that is just what? How bizarre is that? And this unfortunately comes back to, Chris, in my opinion, we've got to the point that less people now own houses. Lots of people own houses, but the same people own all the freaking houses.
Mm.
I mean, the farm I had at Thurston, where I had all that grief for the council, someone not too far from there caused a lot of the trouble. She's sitting on 1,000 houses what she rents out. Well, how bored are you got to be to have that income coming in? That's just
Are you aware of the YouTube? Is it YouTube? Yeah, he's on YouTube. Gary's Economics.
No, I'm not seeing that.
Oh,
No.
he is amazing. He breaks it down so well. He used to be a trader, I believe, and he made millions in his first couple of years, and he gave that up. And now he basically breaks down explaining tax and the con and how rich people don't pay tax, and how it is literally taxes for poor people, not rich people, and the reason why rich people are rich is because everything that they buy is in assets, which creates wealth. For us poor plebs, we're the ones who are paying for all that, because when you buy a nice washing machine or something, that goes into their bank account. When you rent or buy a mortgage, that goes into their bank account, because everything's theirs. He's such an incredible, because it's not an easy subject to talk about, especially to someone like me, but he does break it down in such a way that it's like, oh, fuck. So yeah,
the trouble
check
is,
him
Chris,
out.
we weren't ever taught anything good at school. This and comes back to your point earlier about school. The education system's shite. We were never taught anything. When did we ever learn about compounding interest, or interest rates in general, or what would be the best mortgage to get? Or not to get one at all. How could you get around that? There's so much what we don't know about basic law. And I'm talking basic law. We don't even know what our human rights are anymore. People go, it's against my human right. You don't even know what your human rights are to know if it's against it. Everything what up till, probably the late 60s, 70s, certainly when I started going to school at that point, has all been boshed into completely and utterly being useless. It ain't worth now the paper it's written on, or the tablet it's written on.
At the end of the day, all they want are people docile enough to turn up to work at the right time, do their job and clock off and go home, and just keep the system going. That's all school is. It's just literally there to introduce you slowly into the work system. So
and the other side is, it's now, Chris, it's the big trap of it. I've got a nephew who went through school, went through sixth form, he's gone off to college, he's gone off to university, got a master's degree, and now he can't even get a job in McDonald's and owes about £80,000. Total nonsense. Even if he gets a good job, how's he ever going to pay that back? Well, it's not designed for him to pay it back. And people say, yeah, but the banks need that money back. They just print more. People say, don't pay your council tax. It makes no difference. They just print more. It's just the only person you're kidding is yourself.
So do you think that then? Do you, with regards to the council tax, because that is a valid point, I suppose, that it must make some difference, though, if enough people stop paying it, mustn't it?
Do you think so?
I don't know.
I can only think it must have made a difference this year because they couldn't afford to fill the potholes. So, and I do know a few people are, around the area what haven't paid it. So maybe, just maybe that's what did it. It was, it broke the economics of Suffolk County Councils,
Yeah, I see that they've gone ahead and abolished the old devolution, haven't they?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's good.
That's good. Chris, you've got to look at all of this, right? I bet you if you was to do the maths on it, it was more beneficial to their pension pots for them to not do it than it was to do it. Otherwise, they'd have done it.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, be assured. Speak ill of the council. I take my dad as an example. His pensions are brilliant, which I'm grateful for because it puts them in a really strong position as pensioners. However, when you look at the amount of people that have been paid out of that pot, over the years, Jesus Christ, you just couldn't write it. Yeah. And one of the reasons I think, Chris, that councils have got bigger is because, like everything else, every other system, they need more people paying into the pot to pay it because they've paid themselves out so much along the way. These pensions that are coming out are just ridiculous. So to keep that level of payment up for the people now going into the system, well, that's all right. We'll just employ more people. I remember there was the lady who used to come out and see me from the council about my planning applications at the other farm. She was...
Oh, you froze.
Was the course of the 8 years.
Say that a little bit again. You just froze.
Yeah, sorry, someone trying to ring me. So over the course of the time of someone of the 8 years of me being at the farm, she'd gone from the only person in her department to having 7 people in her department. So she was in charge of 2 people, which put her up to the next pay level. They're all in charge of people, what put them up to the next pay level, and that's what they do. They just keep increasing the freaking numbers to make sure there's enough money in the
it's almost
system.
like a pyramid scheme, isn't it?
It's a Ponzi scheme, Chris. We all know it is. At some point, it's got to crash.
And it will. It will. It just worries me who will be the ones who really suffer for it.
Chris, what's your thoughts on the system crashing? While I'm on this, the system crashing before the end of October, because I can't see them letting Trump go into power. I don't see that happening. So they're going to do everything possible.
Do you know what? I've given up trying to call it, because since I've been doing this, I have heard people say, I've heard it from really good sources. And these people are people that have got people in the right. Oh, yeah, this time in a few months, it's all gone. Yeah, it's, and it's a bit like the climate crisis, where they keep predicting we're going to lose all the land because of the rise in sea. None of it's come true yet. So I kind of just, if it happens, it happens. I suppose in some ways I'm lucky that I have fuck all. I'm skint all the time. So what they're going to take from me, fill your boots. I'm just going to have to watch this play out, really. I can't really call it, because there's been so many false starts, and you're just going to bang your head against a brick wall if you're always trying to second guess when it's going to.
Yeah, and I suppose the other side of this is as well, whilst I'm a Trump fan, he could just be another pawn in all of this, and nobody knows today. It's a bit like the red and blue in the UK. We have these two sides. I think what's interesting.
The thing with Trump is that you're right. He might well be a plant. He might well be on our side. But the thing with Trump is he's so likable in many respects, because he's funny.
Yeah.
I find him funny. And so there's that likableness about Trump. So you could be a fan of Trump just based on his character.
Yes.
Regardless of all the stuff that he does. So, do you know what I mean? So he's likable in that way. So I guess that kind of helps his plight.
I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. So have you got any upcoming talks?
Yeah, I've got one booked down in Southampton with Richard Vobes. I've got another one booked in Attleborough direction in a few weeks' time. I've got several. I'm doing one this Saturday at a farm open day down in Needham Market direction. So yeah, I've got quite a few coming up. I was supposed to be at the Great Resist the other weekend, but because I was so poorly, I just couldn't do the drive as my eyes were funny. So the next one of that is, I think, in November, the Great Resist, which Liz is putting on. I'm definitely going to be at that. That's in Derbyshire this time around.
Okay.
So yeah, I've got quite a few coming up before Christmas, to be honest. Of physical talks where do a lot like with yourself and that, which is all great. But it's nice to go out and do the interviews and things on stage, because you get the feedback of the people, and I like that integration and and that kind of camaraderie, because I love it.
Raising the vibration.
Yeah, I mean, I went to do one in just the other side of Needham Market a few months back, and there was a Green councillor there who thought he was going to tell me straight about the environment and the damage to the ozone and net zero, and he got his arse read to him, not by me, by the audience, who everything he said, the audience just pulled him to bits. Which I just stood back and smiled, really, because here they are.
They're the things that I wish were filmed, because that makes fantastic viewing.
Yeah. Do you know what? And it was brilliant, and we didn't video that one, I've got to say, but that was fantastic, because it was an audience I'd never met before. There was perhaps a couple of people in the room that had seen me speak before. Predominantly, there was about 50 odd people there. No one really knew of me. Just that some random farmer on the bowler hat was doing a talk. They'd sort of book tickets and come along, and people from all over Essex and so forth. And there they were, and they tore this guy a new arse. It's just so funny because it's like, this is the party that claims to be the saviour of the country, you know, when it comes to greenness. And you go through their policies and you can pull them to bits with a pickaxe. You know, it's easy. But, you know, Chris, I think, you know, I speak for both the pair of us here that we know net zero's bollocks. We know that it's just a farce. We know it's just another way to tax you and I. And the minute you understand that,
I don't even think it's about the money anymore, is it? I think it's purely control.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, yeah. I would say you're probably more on that side than the money. It's going to be a way to tax us without a doubt. They'll use that as that opportunity. But the control which will come through 15-minute cities, I think, is where the scary bit comes, because we know there's going to be a catastrophic point coming there, not too distant future, where they will say, because Chris, I don't know if you've seen this about Thetford, but certainly I've seen it around Bury St Edmunds. There's lots of small infrastructure going in some of the conurbations. I was on Morton Hall the other day in Bury St Edmunds, and I noticed, you know, there's another new shop gone up with a chip shop, so they've got a takeaway in a shop to keep people in that area now. And I've seen this on different parts of the town, you know.
Well, I have to say, I don't know if it's a case of playing devil's advocate, but at least they're putting some bloody infrastructure first, and not the gates. Because usually it's what comes first, the infrastructure, all the things to keep you in. And it's usually the things to keep you in. Yeah.
So, like you say, at least they're putting the infrastructure in place. But I think that's why the infrastructure is going in place. I noticed the other day there was some new gates had gone up somewhere. And I thought to myself, what the most bizarre place to put a set of gates? But maybe it wasn't. You know? So you tend to see, you know, it worked in the Second World War for the Germans. You know, they started putting the infrastructure in place and they started cordoning sections off. And then by the time they'd got, you know, to the point they were ready, they curtailed 11 million people into one area and said, best we do this to protect you. And that's what we're going to get told. Yeah, you know,
for your benefit, for your protection.
This climate catastrophe, you know, is going to happen, and you know what we really need to do is protect you because we're so concerned about you.
And what's the famous quote? Is it by Twain? Those who seek or who swap. What is it? Those who swap, like privacy and sovereignty for safety, deserve neither.
Yeah.
Or words to that effect. I'm so crap quotes. But well, listen, it's been lovely talking with you.
Chris, it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. I hope everyone watching this has enjoyed it. Check out Mark on YouTube under the Bowler Hat Farmer. All his amazing work is on there. Follow him on any other socials.
Twitter. Well, we got that Top Tac thing. Top Tic Tac, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got that, and I got Facebook. We're on all sorts of things now. I think we've got up to about 30,000 followers across social media now, so it's coming together.
Nice.
Which, like yourself, Chris, you know, an audience is great. It's nice that, you know, and I still get up. And what I love about it, Chris, before you go, is I love the fact that people still want to come and argue with me who have never heard of before. And then people say, Mark, stop arguing with robots.
Yeah.
so people realise what's going on sometimes before I do.
No, that's it. Absolutely. Right. Well, listen, it's been fantastic. Look after yourselves. Take care. And I'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.
Chris, as ever, it's been emotional.
Nice one, mate. Cheers, buddy.